Welcome to the Ambitious Broker Podcast, where elite real estate professionals share their secrets to success, discuss topics impacting their industry, and gain professional development insights. Enjoy today's episode.
Welcome, everyone, to today's version of Ambitious Broker. Today we have with us a gentleman by the name of Neal Weichel. And Neal isn't a real estate agent. He's a phenomenon. And that is to the tune of something like 4,500 houses sold. He's averaging about 170 houses per year. And I think that for 15, 20 years, you've been the top person for RE/MAX in California, or one of them, aren't you?
Well, the way they do it now, Roger, is you've got small teams, medium teams, large teams. If you were to go back to when I started at RE/MAX in '94, I would, I suppose, be the agent that's produced the most real estate, sold the most real estate.
Right.
But now you've got these teams that are, quite large.
Right.
So I doubt that, if you just looked at units, I would still be the top
There's
person.
still a lot of units, man.
Yeah, well, quite honestly, we do them in a very small, it's mostly, me and a couple of people. It's not, a 20, 25, 30-person team. So
it's not even fair to call them teams, really.
Yeah, they're brokerages, really.
They're offices within offices.
Yeah, sure. And they're very efficient. It's, I'm studying them very carefully right now because our industry has been changing rapidly over the last 5 years. And some very good friends of mine have made the decision to go from being the Neal Weichel model to the, much larger model. And that works for them. And they seem very happy. So it's, it's a fascinating time in real estate. That's
what are you
for sure.
thinking?
Well, I have more years behind me than I do in front of me. So the Neal Weichel Group, which is how I branded my team, will exist whether I'm involved in the day-to-day or not. I'm still very much involved in the day-to-day. Last year we worked really hard. We sold 200 houses. And, it's just a wacky year all the way around for so many reasons. But it was a very busy year. And this year I expect to be the same. But I wrote a 2-year plan that ends at the end of 2022. And at that point, I will not be going on, 130 listing appointments a year.
Right. And you do that now?
I do.
You do. How many did you lose?
I'm right at about 90%.
That you win?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So you lose 10%.
About, yeah.
Yeah.
That's a pretty consistent number. I've been between 86 and 92% for about 15 years.
Right. Let me tell you why I'm doing this show. This is not a show that's designed to be some kind of a moneymaker or anything of that nature at all, or to break any kind of viewing records. When I first started, I met a guy who, and I've told the story on some of the other shows, I met a guy who I just hooked up with. He worked at a different company, and I was door knocking. His name kept coming up, and I called the guy up and I said, I got to talk to you, man, because I'm meeting people and everyone's talking about you, and I got to know what you know that I need to know. And I called the guy up, and he was a superstar, a well-known person in the industry. And the guy was gracious as hell. He said, and he just took time with me. We did lunch, and then we actually became friends. And over time, probably in real estate, the most influential person for me personally.
Oh, wow.
At least in terms of my sales career. And so, I think back at how many times we had a chance to talk to people like that, or like you. You're a busy guy. And by the way, thank you very much. I know you're busy, man. And to come in and to share with it, is special. And we appreciate it. I hope that there'll be people who will dial in and get to have a chance to at least have, a long lunch with you today. Basically. So my whole idea is to say, is to get mindset out to people as much as anything. We're not going to teach in an hour or an hour and change how to close and how to give listing presentations, but we can talk about the personal makeup, what it is that makes something, special. And I want to be kind of transparent with everyone. I've known you since the day you started in real estate.
You were my first broker.
And so we've known each other for a long time. And while we've not been social friends per se, I've always watched you from afar. And after I sold my company, paced you very closely. And I'm very proud of what you've done
Thank you.
as a just a business person. So with that in mind, I got to tell you a story, and I don't know if this is true or not, but I remember specifically, and I've told people this, when I first saw you in a training class, and I went in, I did a couple sessions with the group, and you stood out at that class. And the reason you stood out, and I always would, it was interesting to me to test my instinct. You walk in, you talk to people, you see faces, you see them respond to things and so forth. And I've told people afterwards that when you came in, I felt like you were a person from had a previous career, so to speak, and we'll talk about that in a minute. And when you came into real estate, I had a sense that you were licking your chops almost, like, oh my goodness, this is Little League.
Well, I don't know if I thought it was Little League, but I'll tell you the reason why I chose at that time R.R. Gable was because you talked a lot about training. And, at that time, there really wasn't anybody talking about training. And I came from a corporate sales background where training was mandatory and emphasized and important. And to me, I didn't understand the real estate business. I didn't know anything. And my thought is the sooner I learn how this business works, I will know whether I'm going to pursue it or not. Because what you don't know is I had 2 jobs, actually 3, but 2 jobs when I started with R. Gable. And the next 6 months was me deciding whether real estate was the right fit for me.
Really?
Because I was at an age where, I was in my late 20s where whatever I decided to transition into, I was going to be my career.
Right.
And I candidly didn't think a lot about real estate. My wife certainly didn't think a lot about real estate. She had experience working with builder developers and real estate agents, and she didn't think highly of the profession of real estate agents.
Right.
She was saying things like, what about medical sales? Or what about, what about financial investments and stuff? And I certainly, candidly, I think I could have gone into whatever I wanted to, but the appeal of real estate to me was the ability to have my own business and perhaps most importantly, Roger, not have somebody tell me what I couldn't do, as long as I was following the rules, obviously,
right,
and how much money I was going to make. And that's the problem with corporate sales. They always tell you, and if you get really good at it, they start telling you made too much money. Right? I mean, it doesn't matter. You pick the industry.
Oh, yes.
It's all that way. So what appealed to me about real estate was the ability to do both. And in the 6 months I started with you in May of 91, I'll never forget this. By January of 92, I was making more money in real estate than I was in my corporate job. And I had a pretty good job. And I was very clearly about to blow up because people were starting to call me.
Right.
And I had managed my time where I worked 6 to 1 at my job because it was based on the East Coast. And then I would do real estate in the afternoon. And it just got to the point where I was working 7 days a week and 14, 15 hours a day. And so anyway, I cut the cord in February of 92 and said, okay, goodbye company car, goodbye expense account, goodbye guaranteed salary, goodbye benefits. We just had our second baby at the time, goodbye health insurance.
Right.
Anyway, so that's really where it all started. But R. Gable and your philosophy specifically of let's train these people. Let's get them, technology. Let's be a forward-thinking company. All that resonated with me, and it was a good start.
It's interesting when I first started the company, my real estate company. For 5 years we did not hire a new salesperson, and I basically said I'm not going to do it until I can train people better than anyone else in the industry is training people. And that meant at that time, I don't know if yours was a 3 or 4 week program. Do you remember at the time?
It was a month.
A month, yeah. So we had a 4 week, we had a 3 week, and then we had a 4 week full-time program. So for someone to come and work at R.R. Gable, which was my company at the time, had to make a decision about why would I go there and spend all that time when I could go down at Century 21 and start tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny because I've had a lot of people, even in the last couple of years, say to me, are you surprised at how many of the people who came out of your company has gone on to do extremely well?
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, and it's a very high percentage. I'm very proud of it. And I says, but I got to be honest with you. I think I'm proud of what we put together, proud proud of the training program. But your success has come, not because of that so much as what you've done with yourself afterwards, and we're going to talk about that. But the interesting part of the story, I think, to you would be interesting, is that I said to people, I'd like to take credit for everybody's success, but I think the moment someone has to make a decision about, I'm going to go spend 4 weeks to learn something when I don't have to, that one little thing, all the difference in the world. So oddly enough, our training program, I think, brought out the winners. It attracted people to us, and who like you said, "God has some training," and you look at it probably as that's all there is, and yet it was the most in the industry.
In most industries, that would be nothing. I mean, if you wanted to be a stockbroker, for example, your training would be a 2-year program before you can get a Series 7 license. Right. So any really structured professional sales job, and let's face it, real estate is a sales job. The minute you think that it's not, you're not going to do very well.
Right. Well, all business is a sales business.
All business has a sales component, but real estate specifically, when somebody hires me to sell their home, they're hiring me to sell their home, and that means I have to do a very good job of working with all the other agents, with the buyers that might have an interest in that, and with communicating. Right, especially if I need to guide and advise that seller. Hey, we're a little high on price, or hey, let's do this to make it show a little better, or whatever. All of that is selling. Right. Every single thing we do is selling. Selling an agent on showing a property, selling them on making an offer, selling a client, a seller, if it's a seller, on things they need to do to their home. Sometimes they don't want to do what I tell them to do, Roger, but I know it's going to put more money in their pocket and give them a better experience. So if I can do it in a soft way, in a way that appeals to whatever their personality style is, then they're going to do it, and they're going to have a better experience, and they're going to write me a nice review, and everybody's going to be happy at the end of the day, which of course is the objective. But the thing that is interesting about real estate, and it was interesting in 1991 and it's still interesting today, is people don't want to talk about the sales aspect of it. It is a straight sales job.
That's true.
Right? You are interviewing for the job of selling that client's home, or if you're going to help somebody buy a home, you want to have their confidence that you're going to take them from point A to point B, tell them what they need to do, guide them in their best interest, and have a successful closing.
Right.
Otherwise, you don't get a check and they don't get a house.
Right.
That's all.
How much is selling in the transaction, closing lines and things like that, and how much of it is just building an aura of credibility moving into these relationships?
Yeah, I mean, I think if what you're asking is how good do you have to be at closing? My close is always the same. Do you want me to get my photographer on the phone right now so we can get started? That's my close. I don't have some big wind-up. Mike Ferry, who you know well, will tell you that of the 3 Ps, the 3 things that all real estate people need to do, which is prospect, present, and perform for the closing. The closing is the inevitable result. It's the least important, right? Mm-hmm. It's the presentation. If you make a good presentation that's question-based and based on what's best for the client is going to hire you. It's just like, all right, Neal, where do we sign?
Right.
It's rare that you have to go through close 1, close 2. Now, sometimes you do if commission comes up or pricing comes up. There may be some closing questions around that. But no, it's all, when you talk about an aura, all that is your presentation.
Yeah.
What did you look like when you showed up, and how did you present, what you're going to do for the client? And when you sat down at the table and went through the pricing strategy,
But you walk in to everything today with a reputation.
I do now.
Yes,
yeah, sure,
you do now.
Sure.
And so that helps.
Most of the time. Yeah. I mean, I present, whether it be a buyer or a seller, to a fair amount of people, especially these days, that don't know me. Right? They maybe Googled me, or they maybe Googled, especially buyer side. Right. We're doing some marketing right now that we've never done before. I'm spending money that I've never spent before. Mostly as part of this transition to where a steady stream of leads will come in, and it's happening right now as we speak. And those people don't know Neal Weichel from Roger Hance. They don't care. They want to care about the house on Apple Street, right, or whatever it may be.
Right.
So you're the number 1 agent in Santa Clarita for 21 years in a row. Great. I could give a rip.
Right.
Show me the house.
Right. And so is that changing your dialogue at all? I mean, you have to be thinking about, these people don't know me. They've never seen me. They don't know me. And now you have to think about, This is a little different approach.
Well, my buyer script is always the same. It's because most buyers don't know me. Even if they are, let's say, a referral from a past client, I'm going to ask, especially if they don't live in the, what brings you to Santa Clarita? What's the time frame? What are you looking for in a home? What's your time frame? Who's the lender you're working with? I mean, all the basic buyer pre-qualification questions, whether they know me or don't know me or have no idea who I am or how many homes we sell. Sometimes they're just trying to go directly to the listing agent.
Right.
And of course, then I've got a whole script for that. So,
So let's start at the beginning here. So you were working corporate jobs. Mm-hmm. That's what I remembered mostly about you. And you look at this real estate thing and you see that, boy, that world over there where I make a fraction of the money is much more structured, much more. And then you come over here and you say, oh, well, let's see here. I gotta learn. Mm-hmm. But you were looking at the competition a little bit and you were seeing a lack of structure, a lack of motivation, any of that stuff. Did you feel that about the world that you were entering?
It took me probably, I'm going to say probably 6 months to realize that 10% of the agents were good and to be respected and that I could learn from and I thought highly of. Maybe 30% were okay. Maybe good people.
Yeah, nice people, sweet people.
Work okay, knew what they were doing at least. Right. And then 60%, I honestly had no idea why they were in the business at all. I felt like it was because they didn't know where else to go. There was no commitment.
More true today than it was then? Or?
Actually, I think it's probably pretty similar today, with the exception being that it's pretty easy to sell a few houses and stay in this business and make 40, 50 grand.
Right.
Back then the average sales price was, 175, 180, 190, 200 grand.
Right.
Today it's 7.
Right.
So, I honestly don't know. I don't spend as much time with the other agents as I used to.
Yeah, right. So you leave, you get out of training class, you spend a month at it, you get into, your office in Valencia, and what's the first thing you start doing?
So, you were here, Glenn Rollins was my local broker, and I said, okay, Glenn, I just learned all the tech side. I know how to run the MLS. I know how to run contract. Great, but I need sales training now. Where does pulled out this box of action workshop tapes from Mike Ferry and said, listen to these. And I had been through lots of sales training in my previous job, so I understood that completely and took to it right away.
Right.
And what I would do is, at least at the beginning, I would work my day job until about 1 o'clock, have lunch, and then I would come here and I would either make calls or knock on doors. And then on weekends, I would do open houses every weekend.
So you were cold calling, door knocking. Mm-hmm. Now, did you build a farm?
There was
farm?
There was an area that I worked, an area of Saugus that I worked, and it wasn't very long before I was the number one agent in Saugus. In fact, I think my first full year, I was the number one agent in R.R. Gable. I started to, I would go door to door with always something in my hand, something, a new listing I had taken or a house that was going to be open that weekend, hey, if you want to stop by, I'd love to talk to you. If you know anybody looking to move into the area, people could see I was working. So, it didn't take long.
You think that's it?
I'm sorry?
You think that's it? People need to know you're working?
Don't you think that's what the public wants?
Boy, I think so. I hope so.
Well, I think they do. And I think the public's more educated than ever. You have to remember, back then, the public had no access to the MLS.
Right.
Cell phones weren't used. Every offer was presented in person. The amount of information that the public had, they had nothing. So if I showed up at your door and said, hey, I just listed the home around the corner for $310, it's the largest model in the neighborhood, and we're looking for people that might be interested in moving to a larger home. When do you plan on moving? People would go, hey, I'll never forget the first listing I ever took. The guy was moving to Vegas. And the first sign call I get is from a client, or ends up being one of my best clients, down the street. Neal, we've always wanted to get a bigger home in the neighborhood, but we have a friend that's going to sell ours, but could you come talk to us about maybe buying, and off you go.
Right.
Right. So just working deep into those neighborhoods, it didn't take long before I knew Saugus like the back of my hand. Because when you're going door to door, you learn it pretty quick.
Right. Yeah. And did you focused in a small area, 1,000 houses, 500 houses?
Yeah.
Or all of Saugus?
It was about 1,500 homes.
1,500 homes.
Yeah. And
so you were going back and getting people to know who you were. Your objective is know me.
Inside of 6 months, everybody knew who I was.
So
inside of a year, they were calling me.
Were you mailing?
No.
Spending money?
Mm-hmm.
Just showing your face?
I didn't have any money to spend.
Got it.
No, it was just face to face. I had this kind of odd idea for a long time, Roger, that it was it was kind of a Mike Ferry idea, really. It's much more profitable to just go out and meet people than it is to mail them and expect that they're going to call you.
Right.
The return on that wasn't high enough for somebody that, A, I didn't have anything else to do anyway, and B,
right.
I didn't really have the money to invest in that kind of stuff. And it was drilled into my head, that realtors, by and large, make $1 and spend $1.10. I mean, it took, I think, probably 6 or 7 years before I even committed to the little real estate book that used to be around back then, which was a wonderful, wonderful thing. Back then, before the internet, people called off that all the time. I did a little homes and land for a while because I liked the guy, but that wasn't as effective as the real estate book. And then, of course, by the 2000s, the internet started to come in and changed everything.
Right.
So,
what did you do different then?
With the internet?
Yeah.
That's a good question. It's a long time ago now. It's almost 20 years.
Right.
I think just really use the technology that existed to be more productive. I went back and did a kind of a retrospective on my career. And because last year, I wanted to see if last year was the biggest year I'd ever had for production.
Right.
In terms of money, it was. In terms of units, it wasn't. It was third. But the year that I did the most transactions, I did 220. It was me, 2 assistants, and 1 buyer agent. It almost killed us. And I mean, I'll never forget it. I remember going home at night just being mentally nothing left. I mean, nothing left. But the only reason I could do 220 transactions in 2002, whereas I couldn't necessarily do that, 3 or 4 years before, was technology. It was, you presented offers by fax and then by email. Right? Think about it. You know this.
Yeah.
You had to present every offer in person for the first 7 years of my real estate career. I mean, think about it. Every night you're presenting an offer. Half my business was buyers, half of it was sellers.
Yeah, people come in today, they don't have a clue about those little nuances.
Oh, well, cell phones. I mean, think about this. You had a pager. Remember pagers?
Sure.
Yeah, 286-0151. I still remember it on my belt when I was in your training thing, right?
Yeah.
And, a cell phone alone allowed you to be more efficient. So all the things that the internet did really just allowed you a better use of your time.
Right.
It didn't necessarily mean that you were going to change your marketing dramatically, although certainly in time it was very clear that the role of a buyer agent had changed, and it was very clear that the public had access to information that they didn't have before. They were going to tell you what they wanted to see, not the other way around.
Right.
It just changed everything. I mean, today's millennial, if you will, whether it be an agent or a buyer or a seller, I've got my youngest and newest hire, I hired him a little over a year ago. He's 33 and he's very tech savvy, which is wonderful. Mm-hmm. And he has no idea what it was like. And he shudders to think of how inefficient, right, our industry used to be, right? And it was.
Yeah.
It was. I mean, our contracts were in press hard, you're making 3 copies.
Right.
Remember that?
Right. Well, the good news is there are only 2 pages.
4, I think. But still, your point is well taken.
Yeah.
Now it's all DocuSign. I mean, DocuSign alone makes your life so much easier, right?
Thanks for joining us on another episode of the Ambitious Broker Podcast, where elite real estate professionals share their secrets to success, discuss topics impacting their industry, and gain professional development insights. If you've enjoyed today's episode, please rate it and leave a review.